But okay, how about this actually? Since we briefly touched on by the numbers, but let's face it, like in that setting, it was mainly just Richard asking me my complaints. It was sort of stuff I summarised in that video. I actually want to know from you two what you think of like the whole Flashpoint scenario, because at the moment, all that technically is known is I left. I was basically like the creative lead on the project. Like Monty certainly had a lot of input as well, but he's not from CS, so understandably, it's not his specialty field. Obviously, I brought in a lot of the talent, etc. Now that I'm gone, like as far as I know, there will be a Flashpoint 3. That's one thing I do know. The circumstances of it may, in fact, have changed since I'd have known. They may be still changing now. No one really knows it, by the way, internally. Like, no one on this call can tell you. Obviously, Moses did do Flashpoint 1, so he had some experience with it, but since then has been on the outside as a coach and hasn't actually been involved in Flashpoint at all. Alan was on Flashpoint 2, but wasn't on Flashpoint 1, so there's a little bit of conflict of interest. Like, I'm sure you're not just going to totally trash the project, but at the same time, I'd be interested to know like, outside opinions on what do you think the future of the project is, or do you have any thoughts on me leaving, or do you want to ask anything? What do you think, Alan? You got any thoughts on this, mate?
So with Flashpoint, I think
I might fuck around and tell you, mate. So I'd be careful. I'd be careful on that one.
So with Flashpoint, I think from a broadcast perspective, in terms of like the things we want to do on the broadcast, the things we did do at Flashpoint Season 2, or having stuff like Blind Spot, or having. I know I listened to your video when you quit, Duncan. You said you wanted like a talk show format going into the first games of the tournaments. I think all of these things together, like. Really are a different look to a broadcast than you see in anything else in CS. And I do think in general, broadcasts across CS are really stale. Especially, I'll just call them out. I think all of DreamHack and ESL broadcasts are pretty much the same regimented segments where nothing...
But you'd love to be a part of helping them improve though. That's just
exactly,
something I'd like to clarify. Yeah, of course.
But, well, that's explained then, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, and then just in terms of like stuff with telestration stuff, like we've got so far to go in CS.
Yes.
I think from all of those angles, I think Flashpoint is trying a lot of things out. And I know from being on the broadcast, the amount of like creative space you get as an analyst to say, I want to do this. I want to bring in these clips. I'm going to approach this round on the Telestrate segment. I'm going to, on a Blind Spot, for example, you just fly into talking about whatever you like. So from all of those angles, I think Flashpoint does a lot right. And although I wasn't part of Flashpoint Season 1, I could still see the progression on the broadcast side in terms of how much it improved, and especially over Flashpoint Season 2 for me personally. But I think the whole broadcast in general got a lot better, and I think it was a shame we couldn't do the last 2 days properly in the studio, because I think we would have really nailed it. And I think
we were trying to hit the crescendo, weren't we?
Yeah,
we kind of
I think it would have really all come together with the telestration and getting Blind Spot going, and I think it would have really all come together. So I think the disappointing thing for me is that from the whole broadcast side and the whole tournament format and the prize pool and everything, it was getting so much better over last year, but the teams didn't get a lot better.
Yes.
And being real, the invited teams and the qualifying teams for Flashpoint 2 elevated the tournament a lot.
They saved us, for sure.
The competition. And for example, Gambit was a team that could have been in Flashpoint Season 2. True. And if Gambit had been there, then instantly you might have a really actually quite good 7 teams-ish in the playoffs that could have put up good performances. So, I think it is a bit disappointing that the teams aren't there yet. Maybe they can do in the future, but if the teams were matching the rate of improvement of the broadcast, I think it would be a really good tournament. I just hope in the future they can... we can actually see the same development of the teams and making like true choices and actually, putting investment into right teams and right GMs and right coaches, because they've got a long way to go. And I think the broadcast carried the tournament a lot last year. And hopefully the teams come online a bit more going into the future.
By the way, on that note of what you said there, because that's something obviously I only briefly touched on, but I can expand a little bit of things that basically we planned. Some of them we even were about to do, and then different technical and logistic aspects meant we couldn't do it. For example, when Moses was there for Flashpoint 1, we just couldn't do that pre-show because basically Flashpoint 1 was held way too quick in the process when we didn't even have the executives. They were literally building the studio when we were there. So as a result, a lot of the things we wanted to do, and then obviously the lockdown thing meant we couldn't have the staff. So some of the things I even wanted to do for Flashpoint 1 just never happened. The idea of doing that pre-show, I even actually thought of it, by the way, not just because it would be fun to do, because the idea I had was it would be like a podcast. It'd be like this. Yep. You'd have this for an hour, and then you'd start, the pre-show, and then the games. And the logic I had was this, right? It's actually a flaw that these tournament organizers have, is if you start the match, even with like the analysis, like everyone has to join the stream. Like you don't start at 200k viewers. You have to start at 0 and build up, and people have to get aware of it, and they come in slowly. And it would be like the equivalent of like if a comedian didn't wait for all the audience to get there, he just arrived and started doing the jokes. Then people was walking halfway, like, what the fuck? I'm only 10 minutes late. So what I thought was that was the other thing about the podcast. It'd be a chill environment, so it doesn't matter if you miss it, but you tune in at any point. Then it gets you sort of like going from 0 to 10% hyped. You start gradually going up, and then the pre-show comes along, and it's a way to just be in the show. So there's one thing. Another thing, I'll even give this for free because I'm not going to work for TOs probably. Another one that I was very sad about, because I was promised this for Flashpoint 1, was I was going to have a separate cameraman with a real camera who would be mobile, and he would do stuff like come in the green room, and if people wanted to do like a hot take thing or give some live reaction, we'd just have it. Or it could either have been for the broadcast if they wanted to pipe that in for some reason in a tech timeout, or it would have been for Twitter, social. Yeah, I wanted to make it like expansive like that, which, listen, like it wouldn't have been as great for Flashpoint, obviously, because we don't have the teams, but I could imagine this being amazing if a Blast or someone did it. Like, I'd love to see that shit. So yeah, there was a lot of like side things that, like, these aren't even things, by the way, that are super hard to do. They're just things you've got to like get the TO to understand you want to do, agree to it, give you the manpower, and then you have to physically do it, So there was a lot of missed opportunities in that regard for sure.
For me, I mean, yeah, it's tough to be super critical of Flashpoint just because I know from being there during season 1, and I knew of a lot of the plans, and I was there when they all got trimmed down. But that first, I mean, the first COVID, when we're trying to adapt for like the entire first season, and with COVID the way it was, if we could all think back a year, everything changed from day to day. Like all the rules and regulations were different 2 days later than they were on Monday. So it was hard to ever get anything understood. But you can already see, I think, some of the influence of Flashpoint is one of the first TOs to do skits with talent, and then them actually be well received. And now ESL is doing skits, and now Blast is doing. And I mean, I don't think Blast has gone as deep with the skits, but ESL, obviously, the talent over there did some really cool skits for Katowice this year. So finally, ESL kind of broke through that shell. I don't know. The failure of Flashpoint in the first 2 seasons for me was obviously, it's just hard to like say anything but the teams. I don't understand how you could ever in your life agree to invest $2 million in a spot in a league and then not invest any money into building an actual team. Like some of the teams just had pug rosters for a year, and it's like, what do you like? You're just burning $2 million buy-in. Or if that was your whole budget for Counter-Strike, then I'm sorry, you just can't afford the buy-in plus the raw. I don't understand what it was. I don't know who's making those decisions, but I mean, even myself with limited business experience, it just looks at that and it's like, you're just wasting money. So no matter how good the content was, you had to have teams buying into the format and buying into the league as well, or else it was never going to go anywhere. And unfortunately, no matter what Flashpoint does as a production, they're kind of stuck by the partner teams they have that aren't obviously super invested for whatever reason in improving the product itself. So that's kind of where the buck stops for me with Flashpoint.
The real killer, and obviously it goes without saying, I have no say in how this is done, was the fines situation, which just never ever materialised. Because again, I was promised this. And here's the thing that people don't understand, right? If you're some pleb who goes, I always said Flashpoint would fail, you weren't talking to all the most important owners in esports, you daft cunt. You just made your opinion up out of thin air. Like, it's a bit like that famous time, that the one time I ever slipped up during Flashpoint and said something that was actually factually incorrect was when I famously said that ESL had scheduled over the top of the Flashpoint qualifier. Now, this is where I'm on a level you guys aren't. I'm talking to the fans here, obviously. Like, you guys are just totally on my level. So was when I actually literally, I didn't just have to come out and say I was told the wrong information. I got fucking Dan, one of the owners of Cloud9, to go on Twitter and say that he'd given me the wrong information directly. By the way, good luck if you ever work for ESL or someone, getting them to come out to just take bullets for you like that. So the point is, I was getting this information direct from the people who in theory were like the movers and shakers. So one of the things I was told, I explained it in the video, but I'll very, very briefly go over it here, was even though I was initially told, listen, we'll give you some teams initially, there'll be top teams, even when there wasn't, I wasn't that worried, because I was like you say, Moses, well, no one's going to buy in for 2 mil and then not improve the team. And then when I heard, and on top of that, there's this factor where they'll fine them, and so the logic was going to go like this: if it was 100k a month to not be in whatever top 20 ranking it would be, right? The logic would go like this. Well, if you go a whole year, you just spent $1,200,000. So then for $1 million, put it this way, not even $1 million, for $500,000, you could have either bought a top 20 roster, or maybe you could have obviously a gamble one that's like young players, or you could have just bought out a Nico or someone like that. The money's there to do it. So I thought to myself, look, it doesn't even have to be all of them. If even 2 or 3 of them do this, we're in business. But that is the part that was really crazy. What I realised was this, is since they never did implement the fine system, even if those owners said they wanted to buy players, there was nothing incentivising them. Because to them, it was like, well, I'm already in the league, so I've got my spot. And right now, the league isn't worth much. Now, that's like a reductive way of thinking, because if you put the players in, maybe it would be worth something. But their logic was, look, I've already got I'm basically, if I want to min-max, this is the min part. I've bought in, I've got a team. In fact, keep the shit players, doesn't matter. In fact, the sad thing is, because they collectively all did it, this is where sometimes I worry that behind the scenes there was cartel behaviour, by the way. In fact, because we all have shit rosters, I might even have a chance. Like, mate, MIBR's was one where, listen, if you'd asked me before the tournament, what do you think of this MIBR roster? I'd go, this is pathetic. Like, you haven't tried to make a better roster. But you know what? At that tournament, they had a chance to win it. So I can't even actually like diss them entirely. Like, in terms of the field, they could have won Flashpoint if, like, you know, a few things had gone the other way. Even the Mad Lions won. People forget this. Mad Lions was 1 round from beating Virtus Pro in the upper bracket.
They should have beaten them. Or at least
if you wanted to do the Moneyball approach, they were succeeded in it in that regard. The problem is this, though. The reason why that never made sense to me is that's not the reason we did the project. We did the project, like, at least this is what it was presented to me as. It was supposed to be a life raft for CS to not die and go down with the ship of the old TOs where it's the same old formula. Well, obviously, like, the life raft's just got even more holes in it now. So we're not going anywhere with that, boys. So that's the part that disappoints me as well, of course. Like, people don't realise this. I would have put up with a lot of the shit that I went through if I'd have known we were getting the teams. You know what? Quite frankly, it wouldn't have been the one that could have totally changed everything. But even if the Cloud9 roster had turned out, that would have been something. I mean, remember, at first when it had Walksick and Gassard, like, there was a world where we might have got lucky. They might have been like the 7th best team in the world. Like, that could have happened, you know?